everyone. Welcome back to the Relai Bitcoin podcast. Today I have a very special guest, Efrat Fenigson. And we were just talking about how kind of your content and your persona went viral after this presentation you had. Was it last year or the year before at BTC Prague?
So yeah, it was BTC Prague last year, and the year before it was Amsterdam, Bitcoin Amsterdam, which was my first ever speaking engagement at the Bitcoin space. I've been doing that for many, many years, so I came prepared. But Amsterdam was my first one, and then Prague. And it kind of took off since then. I also interviewed Michael Saylor in Prague. So since then, I'm like, speaking everywhere, traveling around the world. I love the Bitcoin community and that space and all the conferences. I'm having a great time. And fortunately or not unfortunately, I chose a topic that is super hot these days.
Why do you think this resonated so much with the Bitcoin community? I mean, you came in, you were not an OG that came into Bitcoin in 2012 or 13 and could tell the people more about Bitcoin. You basically came from a very different angle. Why do you think that resonated?
I came from the tech and marketing angle, like a background of 20 years in tech. I used to be chief marketing officer for startups and global companies all around the world. So I have a pretty good understanding of technology. So I came in after I think a year and a half or 2 years of my own research into Bitcoin. I didn't feel confident until that point to start talking about it. So I am still a humble student, but I felt comfortable enough to come and speak out after a while. And the topic I chose was CBDCs because I felt like that being a technological solution, many people don't really understand how it works, what it is, what's the difference between what we have now to what is coming. And also, most people don't really understand I'm talking about the average person doesn't understand the difference between CBDCs and Bitcoin. For them, this is digital money, right? And that is, in my opinion, a very important distinction to make because we want people to understand the 180 degrees difference, right? So that they can find refuge or hedge in Bitcoin where they can really risk themselves with CBDCs, which the more I cover this topic, the more I understand it's coming, whether we like it or not. So I think it resonated a lot. I mean, I came from that angle. So I took CBDCs as my main area of research, and I'm a journalist as well. So I write about it, I research about it. I have this weird hobby of following central banks around the world and reading their white papers and trying to sneak into their roundtables. And I mean, not obviously in a public way, right? Especially the Israeli Central Bank. They know me, they don't really like me, but I come from time to time to their conferences or meetups and I speak to them and I ask the tough questions and I do a lot of podcasts and a lot of work to try and raise awareness about this from the angle of just giving people knowledge, just like educating them about what this is so they can really take action in their lives. And I try to encourage them not to be afraid, but rather to understand, because once you have the right education and the knowledge, you are then able to take meaningful action in your life, like getting Bitcoin, for example, or at least taking some of your fiat out from the system into things like gold, right? For people who are too scared and do want to hedge what they've got in sound money. So that's my mission and my goal. And I think the Bitcoin community also, which was a surprise to me, also resonated very much with that because although we are Bitcoiners, although we understand the solution and we have it, like we're there, we have to remember that people are on different stages in their journey. Some are just starting up. They don't have a lot of Bitcoin. They see it only as an investment. They may have just a little bit of their portfolio. They're still scared to take like bigger positions in their portfolio for Bitcoin. So they still very much live in a fiat standard. And whether we like it or not, even those of us who have taken a big position on Bitcoin in our portfolio and are living in a way like a Bitcoin standard, we are still part of a fiat reality, whether we like it or not. Yeah. And so we have to be aware of what kind of fiat rails are being built as we are navigating this complex reality that we live in today. Mm-hmm. And so I think Bitcoiners resonate very much with my work as well, because they want to make sure that they are taking the best decisions on their fiat, or at least their families and friends are. Mm-hmm. So,
because how do you think will the future look like, let's say in 5 years, in terms of CBDCs? Do you think like the big countries, they will all, or even the EU, for example, they will have their CBDC and it will be like forced on people, or like how will the world look like?
So, dude, let's start with the fact that asking me 5 years from now is like in a normal day asking me like 500 years from now, because in the space of a day, we have like a year of stuff happening. So it's like everything could happen from now until 5 years from now. But what I can say, I mean, I can give my prediction, and obviously it will be a speculation based on, everything I'm seeing right now. But I can also hold the understanding that life is very complex and it's made up of many moving pieces, and also humanity can be unpredictable. And so when people are being pushed to a certain point, they can be unpredictable. They can change their behaviors. They can change human action. Things can change, whether it's on the top level, the politicians and the elites that are making the calls, or whether it's on the masses, the like everyday average people. So many things can change from now until 2030. But what is for sure is that plans are in place for the year 2030, right? We are talking now in 2025. There are plans that have been in the works, in the preparations for decades now. Even a century, some may say, depending on where you start counting from and where you look at it. And I think the most obvious manifestation of one of those plans is what we know today as the United Nations Agenda 2030, which is an official plan, a program that was made by the United Nations and its member countries. 193 countries signed it in 1995. It was, I want to say, in Rio. And then in 2015, it was brought again. I mean, it started as Agenda 21, and people think 21 is the year 21. It's not. It's the 21st century. It's the agenda for the 21st century. And then it rolled into, as we got closer to 2030, it rolled into what's called Agenda 2030, which talks about the year 2030 with very clear goals, very clear measurable goals for the different nation states and countries around the world of what kind of policies they have to enact in their countries in order to make 2030 a different reality than what we live in, because it's all under the assumptions. I would say some of them are false assumptions, but the assumptions that Earth is going to destroy itself, humanity is ruining Earth, and we have to take responsibility for it. And climate is one of the most burning topics, and we have to deal with it. And pandemics are super a big threat for humanity, and we have to take care of them. We have to vaccinate the whole world. They have various different sub-plans inside this Agenda 2030. In fact, it's made up of 17 sustainable development goals. And how does money, CBDCs, and fiat tie into all of that? Well, there is no clear or explicit mention of CBDC in the Sustainable Development Goals, but there are plans by the Bank of International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, the BIS, the IMF, and many other financial institutions like central banks, like the ECB and the Fed, etc., that are that are linking their CBDC work or digital monetary strategy work into the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. For example, they want to end poverty. For them, CBDC is financial inclusion because they think that with CBDCs they will able to reach everyone. This is socialism 2.0, right? They're going to give subsidies. They're going to give like free money in the form of digital money, etc., etc. So that relates to one sustainable development goals. There are more goals related to digitalization of systems. That's why you're seeing in the EU, for example, the digital ID rollout, right? Or all around the world, but I'm talking to you in the EU and your audience. So digitizing our life is one of the goals of Agenda 2030, and therefore digitizing our financial system is another goal. Now, those of you who are listening who are into Bitcoin or money already know that our money is already digital, right? So it's like, what's the difference? Fiat is digital today, right? But the big difference here is the centralization. So this is like CBDC is all about central bank digital currency. So it's like a further step to centralize even more the control over how money is being managed, how money is being enforced, how we can use money in order to control your consumption habits, your behaviors, your spending, etc., etc. And so clamping down on people's liberties of the freedom to transact, the freedom to, the freedom of choice of what you're going to do with your money, this is all under risk with CBDCs, and people are not really aware of that. Obviously, privacy is another big part of that. And this is it's not looking good because this is going to happen. I mean, we already know. You're asking me about 2030, but we already know that by the end of this year, the EU is going to be launching the digital euro, October 2025.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
that early,
they're
right?
launching it. I mean, this is the beginning of the rollout phase. They obviously they have now, between now, May and October, they have 5 months to pass all the legislation and get the blessing of how Christine Lagarde said, we need the blessing of the European stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? The European Commission, the European Parliament, and the European the Union. There's another one, but it's everyone except for the European citizens.
Yeah,
They're
they're all
not a
not elected
stakeholder.
officials, right? All of these stakeholders, none of them are elected by the people.
None of them are you. Like,
Yeah.
who said it? Carlin? It's a big club and you ain't part of it, right? So, so Christine Lagarde, she's like something else. You gotta follow her. She just came out recently in another little interview, which I posted on my Twitter, where she's saying, my council need to do this, and my it's her council. It's like hers, right? This is like these people's true faces are coming to light if you follow everything they say and do. It's all out there in the open. So yeah, they said it's gonna be starting to be rolled out in October 2025. It doesn't mean that overnight you will have digital wallets for all the EU. No, but it means that they predict that it's going to take between 2 to 2.5 years, that phase of rollout, right? And, we're looking at like 2028 when this is already a reality, if this works. And if you ask them, like the EU and the ECB, they want it to work, and they have all the justification lined up. The reasons are lined up. They say they want it because they need military funding. They say they want it because Trump is pushing stable coins, and they need to have a different strategy because stable coins are taking control away from the EU, putting it in the hands of foreign actors. They say that banks are losing clients because of stable coins. Banks are losing fees, and obviously we cannot allow that. they say that I think their key argument is like dependency on sources outside of the EU, and they want to try and paint a picture where if you do a digital euro, it puts the strength or the power back in the hands of the EU. And then they give a very interesting argument, which is called essential infrastructure. One of the ECB's executive, his name is Piero Cipollone. He claims that the digital euro is necessary, and he compares it to water or electricity. He says they are essential services that should be controlled locally. However, the EU itself depends on foreign sources for energy and water resources. So that completely contradicts his logic, but they're trying in many different ways to convince you that it's important to have a digital euro. On top of that, you have von der Leyen saying they need to rearm Europe, and they have a plan for that requires 800 billion euros. And in order to fund all of their military plans, she aims to redirect or mobilize 10 trillion euros in private savings to fund the military expansion through what they called Savings and Investment Union. Now, if you go and search some information about the Savings and Investment Union, you don't find much. It's probably new or it's hidden.
I tried that. I actually
Did
tried
you?
Google search and a ChatGPT search, and it didn't give me much. It was
There
like
is not much information about it.
information there is really very, very soft, right? Nowhere you can find something like, oh, we might take money from private citizens to fund our operations or our infrastructure projects or rearm projects, etc. None of this. But there's like, it's very vague blah blah that you can find, but no details at all. But at the same time, there is this risk, right? Or you might know more about this topic, like what is their actual plan following their conferences and meetups and more like private conversations that you can follow of these central banks? What is the plan with that? Like
For CBDC, you mean?
I mean, and more specifically on these 10 trillion of mobilization.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a what's called the takedown. Like it sounds like a bail-in.
Yeah,
I think what they want to do is they're saying basically, your Europeans are very good at saving, especially like German, Swiss, right? They have deposits in the bank. The money is just sitting there. The fiat is sitting there. Yeah. We're going to essentially like make use of the deposits that are sitting there idle, not doing much for you. We're probably going to give you some interest or something in return of like taking your money and using it to fund war. You don't have to worry, dear peasant, because we'll take care of your fiat. And they're going to do a bail-in. And then instead of like returning, like in Cyprus, right? Instead of returning everything you had, they'll return something minus a certain percent. Yeah. And obviously, I don't have official information about that. But I think what they are referring to is the deposits and savings of Europeans that is just sitting idle there, and they need to fund the war. They will probably print money as well, but they want to also show that they are not just printing money, they're also like using what exists. Yeah, but it exists, it's not yours. It's the people's money. It's the private property, and they're abolishing.
Exactly. But from their perspective, from their sick perspective, it makes sense, right? Because they are kind of at the edge of what they can print, because the inflation in the EU is already very high and people start to feel it. Like inflation is this hidden tax that works as long as the people in their day-to-day life, they don't feel it too much. It's like between 1% and 2% a year is still bad, right? If you calculate it over decades, but people don't feel it. But then when it gets 4 or 5%, or in real terms, the price increases of certain, daily products is even 10%, then people start to feel it, and start, the risk for protests and political unrest increases. So they can only print to a certain amount. And now these 800 billion, where will they come from? Like they can't just print it, right? They need to find other measures to take money away from the people, because the tax is already super high as well. Like here in Switzerland, still super okay, but in all the EU countries, like Germany is what, 45%. I think in France, Italy even a bit higher. In Brussels, I mean in Belgium is like 49%. I think in Portugal it's like 51%. So they can't like. The tax cannot be above 50%, otherwise people will just leave. And so they need to find another source they need to find another way to take the money from the people.
You see, Julian, between us, I like, and this, if I can contribute something to Europeans listening to this today, is like my warning of like Europeans, like you are in danger, you know, your money is not safe. You are, I don't know if I'm able to say it on your podcast, but you're fucked, you know, if you don't take care of what's yours, the wealth that you've worked really hard for, they're either going to tax it or they're going to find a very creative excuse to take some of it or all of it away from you. So if you don't have your money in assets and sound assets like Bitcoin, then you know, you're up for a treat. You know, to add on to what you said before, the project itself, the CBDC project for the digital euro, is estimated at 430 million euros for infrastructure and operations over 10 to 15 years, excluding internal ledger development cost. And they have been working on developing their own ledger for a while now with, I think, 60 different financial institutions and countries. And the ECB said, because what you said is very correct, that they're afraid to like piss people off so that they don't revolt, because they know they cannot continue inflating more and more. So in order to like calm people down, they said, don't worry, we're not going to take that 430 million euros from you. We intend to fund this through seniorage income, which is the way that they are basically creating new money out of nothing when they print, right? Seniorage income is the income they make. It's like what Elon Musk found in the US. It's like the computers that are creating the money. This is what it is. It's like we create money and then the digits are being added. It's like created out of nothing. Seniorage income is basically the income they make out of printing new fresh money. So they plan to do the same with CBDCs, to fund the 430 million euros out of seniorage income, just as they do with banknotes. So I think this hints or implies a further printing.
Of course. I mean,
Right.
that's a hidden tax, right? They
Right.
just print, there will be more money, so the money that people have on their bank account is worth less. So the purchasing power is going down. That's exactly what they do all the time. They have to use
Exactly.
different methods
They
to
just
do it,
use
but-
different terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so, you know, do the math. You have 450 million Europeans today. You need to have 450 million wallets in each one, like digital wallets for the digital euro. In each one of them, they will probably start with some airdropping. You know, they'll give you like some free, whatever, 20 euros, 100 euros just to kind of boost adoption at the beginning. So that's already 450 times 10, 20, 100. You're looking at like 4 billion euros just to start off the project to get people to use it. And then imagine the costs that they need in order to develop all the integrations with existing payment methods, because the last thing they want to do is have like a standalone digital euro app that will compete with all your existing method of payments. And they say it in all the white papers you read, especially in Israel and the EU. They are talking about the fact that they have to go through existing payment methods like your credit cards, your wearables, your digital apps. They don't want to compete with them because they know it. Like in China, it's a lost cause. You know, China tried to compete with Alipay and WeChat Pay, and they can't because they have the dominancy in the market in terms of market share. All they could do is integrate the ECNY, the digital yuan, into the back end of the Alipay, the WeChat Pay, and a whole lot of an array of other digital apps that exist, like for traveling, like, you know, your Chinese Uber, your travel app, your food app, and everything. So it's all integrated inside, and all those integrations, they also cost money. So imagine how much costs, you know, you as a tech entrepreneur, you know, every one of those integrations take developers, takes time, takes testing. It takes a lot of money to build that infrastructure into existing fiat rails. So we're going to see, I think, massive, you know, looping back to your initial question of what it's going to look like 5 years from now. I believe we're going to have CBDCs in place. I believe it's going to look very different in different zones or countries. The EU, I think, is going to lead in terms of like the very similar to China, like the most extreme manifestation of CBDC, as long as the people will not resist or revolt it. And then following the EU, like the ECB is going to be, you know, the modern Western blueprint, because China is a blueprint, but it's not very popular to say that we're all doing what China is doing for obvious reasons. So the ECB is going to be the one. And Israel, for example, this is a great example because Israel is like a Western country. And it's already saying, the Central Bank of Israel is already saying, we are waiting for the ECB. We're waiting to, you know, when they launch, we're preparing ourselves. So many countries will follow the same trajectory. I think the implementation style is going to be like a double tier architecture where the central bank is not doing retail CBDC directly to the people, but rather working with payment service providers. They're all writing it in their architectural white papers. And therefore they can say, you know, and they are saying it, we're not going to have access to your private details. We're not going to have any... We can't touch what's yours, dear citizen, don't worry. But through regulation, obviously, we can give the proper order to the bank or the payment service provider to tell them to give us what we need if you don't comply with the law. As you very well know, with MiCA, with AML laws, with you know, the KYC standard, you have to really be highly regulated in order to participate in the game. And that is the entrance standard. So they will authorize different payment service providers, PSPs they call them, to be CBDC providers, and they will lend them CBDCs just like they do with fiat today. But it is a direct liability of the central bank, just like cash is. So the moment you have, I mean, think about it from that perspective, the moment you have a lot of payment service providers, whether they're banks or other institutions like big supermarkets or whatever, whenever you have a big majority of payment service providers holding those reserves of CBDCs lent to them by the central bank, and that's a direct liability of the central bank, then the central bank can come out and say, oh, okay, from now on, we do have direct access to information. And from now on, this is a legal tender in that country and we have to use it. So it's like a gradual, it's the gradualism. So it's a gradual strategy to make it operational everywhere. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to flip the switch when it's convenient. It's going to take a few years because they want to start soft and nice and then bring out the coercion mechanisms of the state like we know that they can do. They have a monopoly on the money and they intend to use it. Yeah, and it just helps them make their operations now more efficient, right? They can reach more people in a more efficient way, and they can print money, for example, in a more efficient way. They can do these KYC, AML, anti-terrorists. That's what they call them, but actually they're control mechanisms, right? They can use them. This whole supervisory and monitoring and controlling of what people spend their money on and not. They can do this much more efficient and more centralized. And as you said, I mean, banks,
doing it through the banks is not an argument for it not being centralized. I mean, banks are just the extension of central banks, basically. They are 100% regulated by all elected groups that are all controlled by a very small minority, which is the central banks, and even the central banks are probably controlled by others. I don't know. What's your take on who is behind that? Are you a bit of a Are you open to conspiracy theories there, like who's behind the Fed and the central bank and all that?
My audience knows that I am open to almost everything and anything since COVID woke me up to some inconvenient truths.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to consider everything, but from my own research, obviously we have, it's like European elite controlling a lot of the money that is driving or powering the financial system of the world. And I think what we're seeing now, while people are kind of believing that what we're seeing is the war, the trade war of the US and China, the real war that is happening behind the scenes is probably the US and Europe. I think that some of the old money, big money oligarchs from Europe that are controlling a lot of the London, like City of London, the money creation out of London and obviously related to the ECB and the EU, are basically clashing with the US wanting to create a different way of controlling the world with its dollar. I mean, the objective of the US of continuing to dollarize the world and increasing the expansion of the dollar through stable coins is something that is very hard for the money cabal of the world to accept, because it means very little control. I mean, there are obviously shortcomings and disadvantages in stable coins. In many ways, it is very similar to CBDCs, but at the same time, it is different. It's like a lighter version. They don't have full control, and they definitely don't have the central bank liability on stable coins. So they do have indirect control through regulation, but that is leaving a lot of the playing field open for innovation and for different things to come out. So I think the old money controllers are not really fond of that strategy, and I think they will do many things to try and stop it. I am really, just as I said, a humble student in that world. But if you take a listen to the recent conversation between Tom Luongo and Caitlin Long, they had a fascinating podcast episode recently on Tom's podcast, and they talk about the hidden stuff happening between Europe and the US and stable coins and this is fascinating. So I believe, and yes, I obviously know, reading this, The Creature of Jekyll Island, obviously there are big people pulling the strings, and this is all coming back and relating to what I talked about before, the global agendas, because you can see, in this book, you have mentions of the World Trade Organization, how it came about, and the different trade agreements between countries, the exchange rates and everything. And they used the term New World Order back then when they started doing it. It was 30 years ago. They used it a long time ago, but 30 years ago, as they were building the modern monetary system, they were using the same terms that they are using today when they're talking about reshaping and creating a new monetary order. So it all ties together. I think we are living through very, very interesting times of change, times of transitions. There are many moving pieces on the chessboard. it's like musical chairs, you know, they're all trying to pull, you know, they're all running. And then when the queue's up, everyone's trying to sit, someone falls. It's super interesting. I think people need to, I mean, when we take this back to the individual, like the customers of your company or the listeners or followers of my podcast, or like just the average person looking to kind of get by and just live a normal life during this time, my recommendation is always to just like work, do some introspect and work on yourself so that you are not being led by fear and too many emotional decisions, because we make economical decisions all the time. And now is the time to kind of hedge what's yours, protect what's yours, and take a step back and try not to be too irrational with your decisions. Because we do need to protect ourselves during this time. It's a time where we can be very vulnerable, and there can be many different reasons. You know, we saw the blackout yesterday in Spain, Portugal, and France. Like within hours, things can change, you know, and if you have to hedge yourself against anything, if you are purely digital, there's a risk in it. If you don't have cash, if you don't have anything else that will back you up in emergencies, that could be a problem. You know, if you don't have any Bitcoin and you're relying on fiat only, that is a risk. You know, you have to kind of learn to understand all the different dangers and risks that you are facing today, because really we are being led to think all the time that our biggest enemies are people that are our neighbors or of different religions or of different tribes or whatever. But really, I think the biggest enemies we have today are the people who pull the strings and they think they have the power. I mean, sometimes they call it powers that be. I call them powers that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But this is what I do. Like, people need to understand how to get the power back to themselves, like how to get sovereignty back to their lives. Where have they given their power away? If it's financially, if it's emotionally, mentally, if it's, you know, on the educational front, if it's to your bank, whoever you gave your power to, try and start and studying how you can reclaim that power back, because that's the time to do it.
Our slogan basically is take control over your future and over your financial future, right? And you can basically today only do it, or it's the best way to do it with, you know, buying Bitcoin and holding into self-custody, because then you have the minimum risk. The only risk lies with you, basically, but you don't have counterparty risk. You don't have risk of inflation by money printing by governments, or control, or seizure, or confiscation, or blocking transactions, or whatever, because it's just a free, open network that you store your wealth in, which I believe makes sense. I think you're the same. So I will ask you the last question that I'm asking all of my podcast guests is, so you seem to be a big fan of Bitcoin for the right reasons, which you have, you know, in a very inspiring way laid out now. A lot of food for thought, actually. For me, I need half an hour after that to process a lot of that, because you know, CBDCs and that, I haven't been so deep into it, but this helped me to understand a lot, and it just makes me more bullish on Bitcoin. But anyway, the question is, how much do you, of your kind of total wealth, how much did you decide to put into Bitcoin, like a percentage or just rough estimate?
Well, when I started, I started small and I kept buying chunks. And as I was learning more and more, and I had an apartment as an investment. I wasn't living in that apartment. I was just using it to store my value, right? As most people do, you buy an apartment to get the monthly rent so that you can live off of it. It's not enough to live off of it. But, you know, as I'm looking at my yield and I'm looking at that investment that I had for like 12 years, and I'm learning Bitcoin more and more. And I'm like, at one point I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I now understand Bitcoin well enough. I don't need that, like, Bitcoin is never going to call me to ask me to replace a window that has broken. Bitcoin is never going to call me and say the sewerage doesn't work, or the sink is now blocked, come and fix it, or bring a plumber. Bitcoin is going to shut up once I have my money sitting there. And so I had to answer all the questions I had for myself about doing such a bold move. But then, I sold my apartment and put it into Bitcoin. And so today I think most of my portfolio is in Bitcoin. I have some gold as well, physical gold, because I believe in that still. And it's a good physical hedge. And I have some MicroStrategy stocks. That's the only stock I have. And it acts more or less like a salary for me, like a fixed income. I know it's dangerous, it's risky, and you need to understand more or less what's happening there. But it's I'm mostly in Bitcoin. I live on a Bitcoin standard where my fiat income is through my podcast and journalism, just a little bit. And if I need to, I have my stocks to earn yield from. So I keep some fiat in the bank so that I can live off of it. But I have everything in Bitcoin. And my son also has his own wallet, and he saves. He called me the other day and said, Mom, he's 15 and a half years old. And he's like, he was on holiday and he said, I've worked 3 days this week and I made $250. I said, wow, that's awesome. Well done. He said, I'm going to keep 1/3 in my wallet, in my cash wallet, and 2/3 are going to go to Bitcoin. I'm like,
so smart.
Let's
So
go.
smart. And that's the best you can do for your kids, right? Just the financial education. Don't even give them Bitcoin, but let them understand so that they will earn Bitcoin and save in Bitcoin. It's, his future is safe, right? That's the best you can do for your son. Well done.
Amen.
Cool. Thank you, Efrat. It was really inspiring. I learned a lot. Thank you for taking the time, and see you soon at one of these conferences. Which one is the next? I think.
Thanks for having me,
Vegas.
Julian. Thanks.
Cool. See you there. Thank you. Bye, Efrat.
Hey, this is Joel again from the Relay team. First of all, thanks for listening or watching to the podcast. We really appreciate your help here. If you want to actually help us out further, you can leave us a 5-star review in the Apple Podcasting Store, in Spotify, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts, because this way we'll actually reach more people with this fantastic content. And I'll see you in the next one.